50% of every penny you spend on online services like Asana or Netflix and whatnot goes to the Uncle Jeff tax. We call
Wow.
it. Three companies really control 80% of the market share of the cloud. The vision of Akash is to create truly peer-to-peer clouds, right? So by 2024, I think Akash will be the most distributed network.
What was it that made you want to build Akash on Cosmos versus making it in an EVM dApp, for example? What is up, Greg? Great to have you here.
Great to be here.
It's been a while. Listen, I'm here with Greg Osuri, the founder of Akash Network, which is the decentralized marketplace for cloud compute. Most people, when they hear crypto, they think of DeFi, they think of NFTs, maybe now metaverse. But there is this space, this segment called, which I refer to as D-Web. Others, back in the day we called Web3. Now Web3 is taking over everything, which is the infrastructure for the web itself on decentralized rails. And there's projects, maybe people have heard of Helium that does broadband on connectivity, and there's Akash that does cloud compute, and there's storage like Arweave. And so let's dive into the early days. What made you? What brought you to cloud computing, and what is the vision that made you want to decentralize in the first place?
Sure. I think the category we can call these new class of web services is decentralized web services.
Decentralized services, yeah.
That's a term of coin. And so DWS, I think, is a good sort of category.
DWS,
decentralized web services. That includes storage, middleware, compute, caching, discovery, DNS. So you can put Handshake and all of them, Arweave, Storj, Filecoin, Graph Protocol, Lightyear. So all these like services that provide a what you would normally get in a typical cloud, like an infrastructure as a service provider, but in a decentralized way. And the premise of this new wave of decentralized web services is the fact that there's enormous amount of underutilized resources out there, be it bandwidth, be it compute, be it storage. We can essentially unlock that supply and offer that in an open marketplace in a cost-optimized manner that's fair, right? So I think that's the premise of the entire notion of a decentralized web services. How Akash began really was to give a short story.
Because I saw it start as early as 2015, which is like this is like Ethereum early days even.
Right, 2015. Actually, like my work on the version of Akash began in 2014.
Okay.
Really, when I was fascinated by this new technology called containers. So in 2012, I discovered containers, and containers would solve a packaging problem that was very, very prominent in the cloud deployment space, right? So they would solve the parity problem in the sense that you could package an application locally and have expected behavior on a remote server. It's a big deal. And Google mastered this technology, and there's a company called Docker that came along and made this technology much simpler. And so I was doing a lot of research and a lot of work in that area, right? Schedulers, fault tolerance in that area. And long story short, in 2015, I started Overclock Labs to really take this container technology to market, because there's very few companies that even heard of what Docker is. And Kubernetes was just early, right? I was one of the few people in the world that was working on Kubernetes at that time, right? And I, sort of like had a vision to enable a Kubernetes cluster at the edge of the network. So really build a high-performance cloud by building an edge network of Kubernetes clusters.
So at that time, the decentralization was a little bit in the background. It was more about creating a network.
Distributed systems,
Yeah,
right?
distributed
Like heavily distributed systems. But we discovered if you distribute the system to a certain degree, in order to really function in a fault-tolerant manner, you need decentralized systems. And why? Because in order for edge computing nodes, right? Edge computing in the sense these nodes are working at the edge of the network, right? Without like the comfort of a mega hyperscale. So they are supposed to work in pretty much any data center. Some of them even work on the device, like vehicles and whatnot, right? But most of them are actually working at the edge of the network, right? And so they need to operate independently without relying on a centralized controller or a centralized control plane, we call it. So in order for them to reliably operate, there's a new sort of like the scheduling like mechanism or algorithm we use is called optimistic scheduling. So optimistically, they should be able to like self-serve, self-heal, self-operate, right? Instead of pessimistically, in the sense, then you got to look for a resource. You're not sure the resource is available. That means you got to look for a centralized a database. You got to get a lock, and when you have
And what problem was it trying to solve? Were you trying to solve the problem at the time that anybody can have the GPU provide, cloud compute,
Right.
or was it like more so from the provider perspective that like you're democratizing it, where like it's just like anybody can run a Shopify store, anybody can now become, a provider, or more so like that this would be more cost effective? Like,
the problem we're trying to solve was like, how can we build a really high performance cloud
Yeah.
where you can deliver the workload within 100 milliseconds?
gotcha.
So our thesis was, if you can deliver an application, if a request, every interaction from the phone or from a device can respond within 100 milliseconds, you have something called cognitive continuation. That means it feels smooth. It doesn't feel like there's a lag. It feels like a local environment, local application. So that was the vision, to build a high performance cloud. And we tried to do that over Amazon. It wouldn't work because Amazon's very limited in terms of distribution. There are
Right.
only 18 regions in data centers. Only way to do that is to go to the data center at the edge of the cloud. And now when you go to the data center, the fault tolerance becomes a question. And then so we started like experimenting with sort of like using BitTorrent style replication,
Yeah.
peer-to-peer replication. So that's the premise of how we ended up with the blockchain, right?
So performance was actually the heart of it, not like censorship resistance. Like the initial idea was not like AWS is banning us. It's more so this is how we can actually get to a high performance level.
to high performance was the premise of starting
Premise of it,
a heavily distributed cloud, right?
Yeah.
And then as we discovered, like throughout the years, we discovered that Amazon actually, was a big threat to this vision of sovereign compute.
Yeah.
Right. All the way from what they do to just prices. They have 97% market.
Yeah.
So if you want a heavily high performance cloud, you got to get the base price down because you need a lot of replicas,
Yeah.
right? You need high performance tolerance, right? So in order for that to happen, you can't just have like one or two servers. You need at least, let's say, a quorum of 9 servers to have a decent like American distribution, right? Like, so if you have 9 servers, the cost is very high, right? And you have this enormous amount of supply that's available. I mean, back then there were 8.2 million data centers when we began. Now there's 7.1 million data centers.
Oh.
So that's another reverse trend, which is also
It's actually gone down. That's
very
surprising.
scary if you don't do something about it.
Why is that? Why did it decline? Just
Cloud.
because of monopoly? Oh, okay.
Cloud is consolidation, right? Cloud just goes and builds hyperscale, and there's this fallacy of like operating a data center is very, very expensive.
Also,
And-
there's fewer data centers, but probably bigger ones.
There are few data centers that are bigger ones that are operated by cloud operators, and the edge data centers owned by companies, individuals, and whatnot are going away. So if you don't do something about getting them back, we'll be at the purview of the cloud.
Now, what makes you think that that wouldn't happen with a marketplace like Akash, where if we look at comparatives, let's say Bitcoin mining, for example, like yes, the initial vision was that we are going to run our own initially GPUs, then we're going to run our own ASICs to mine Bitcoin, but ultimately it became consolidating into mining pools, mining firms, and so forth. And now, let's say 6 miners make up 80% of the Bitcoin
Yeah.
hash power.
Yeah. So what's happening is, that's not only mining; it's in the cloud as well, right?
Yes.
So 3
Yeah, yeah.
companies really control 80% of the market share of the cloud, right? And it's getting increasingly consolidated, and the outcome is the margins for companies that use the cloud are dwindling. So A16Z came up with an amazing report recently called the $1 Trillion Paradox, where they said 50% of every penny you spend on online services like Asana or Netflix and whatnot goes to Amazon's or Google's of the world.
Really?
Right? 50%. Half of every dollar you spend goes to the Uncle Jeff tax. We call it,
Wow.
right? It's a beautiful report. And now these companies are realizing that's not feasible anymore and starting to go back to the data centers. So there's a repatronization of data centers. But the problem with data centers, owning and operating one, is underutilization. So you have enormous supply that's available. Like Walmart recently announced that they're going to open 10,000 new data centers, right? Because they want edge capability.
And they would want those cables in-house, I'm assuming. So they're, instead of hosting through Amazon, they would host their own. Would they host their own, or would they also start selling web services?
Well, with Akash, they'd be able to sell web services, right? Ideally, they should be able to sell web services to Akash. And Akash is getting to a point where a lot of these big companies are taking a very, very closer look as Akash gets into, use cases like military and whatnot. Like military has their own service; they're not using Amazon's or Google's of the world. So the premise of Akash is like, well, if you're a company and you have a data center and you want cloud-like capabilities, modern deployment capabilities, use Akash. And you can limit your applications, your data centers to only serve your applications or a certain public list. You can moderate that way. You can completely have whitelist and blacklist just for your providers if you want, right? And if you want to sell that excess capacity, say if you don't have internal demand that will meet your, that would utilize all your services, you can sell that to a marketplace, right? And if you want to scale up, if you want to, say you peaked and you want more capacity, you can then go attach to the cloud. So just by using Akash doesn't mean you're automatically just taking everything from outside or you're selling your space to outside. You can start off with a very internal only, and then if you're comfortable, you can go external. The vision of Akash is to create truly peer-to-peer clouds, right? So a company like Walmart or a company like Joe's data center is actually a data center, right? Some dude operating out of Montana, right? Or like a Compute North mining rig sitting in a renewable that takes advantage of the renewable overage, right, in Texas. And there's a lot of power that goes to waste. Data centers there are super cheap, right? There's so much variety of these data centers, all can operate in a peer-to-peer world. So that's really the vision of Akash.
And I know we had a Zoom call either in Q4, Q1, and at the time, the marketplace was still rolling out, and you were hoping that was got ready for the GPU for the merge, where then all of a sudden a lot of GPUs hit the market, and also like we're still working persistent storage, and I think persistent storage finally went live in August.
Yep.
So that's important to note, because what I want to ask is, what can be done today with Akash? Because I remember back then, for example, we said there's very limited amount of like applications that could actually be run. What can be run today, and like what is still yet to come? In order for like what kind of markets can be captured by Akash?
So right now, ephemeral workloads. So I mean, a lot of API servers and things that don't need state is what we started, right? State light services we call it. Then we attach network storage. Now you can have heavy state applications, right? Now recently we released IP leases, so you can have unique IP addresses. That's going to go to production in next 3 weeks or so. So you can have like fixed ports like Solana nodes and whatnot now can finally run on Akash, and Ethereum nodes will run very, very smoothly on Akash, right? The proof of stake nodes. And then with GPUs, you can do a lot more heavy lifting. You can do machine learning workloads. You can run machine learning right now, but you're not going to take advantage of the GPUs, right? And GPUs are coming within the next 3 months. We're very aggressively targeting. So we have.
So the marketplace is still rolling out.
The marketplace, the GPU marketplace.
GPU marketplace.
So Akash is fully functioning.
Yeah.
People are using it right now. About 20% of we have 20% penetration in Cosmos, right? But I would say like 50 out of 500 entities in Cosmos kind of use it, and that's
like
growing.
Osmos run on Akash, right?
Osmosis, Juno Network. We have like Netadao. We have. If you go to ecosystem of Akash Network, you'll see a whole lot of projects that are actually.
And is it because of the relationship that Akash has with Cosmos, since it's a Cosmos project, or is it that it's just easier technically to integrate?
So it's our home ecosystem, right? So Cosmos is home, and Akash is a really good brand, and people understand how to use Akash. It's Cosmos native, right? So, it tells a lot about like just the fact that knowing what wallet to hold, like having Kepler access, it's a big deal in terms of like friction for adoption, right?
Right.
But that's slowly expanding to Ethereum and Solana now. So as with the IP addresses, you can slowly run Solana nodes now, right? So Solana is very, very expensive. It costs about $5,000 per node. In a market like this, a low cost, hosting provider means a lot to the Solana ecosystem. And there's also like stats that like 39% of Solana nodes are running on Akash and Amazon, and that's not, it's not a good look. And 69% of the Ethereum nodes are running on like the big cloud, right?
Yes.
Out of them, most of them are running on Amazon. So people, it's not that Amazon good or bad. It's just the fact that there's such heavy concentration of like.
It is a potential point of failure. We had I think it was like August 26th this year, which is less than a month ago. Hetzner banned like Ethereum nodes, which made up 10% of the Ethereum nodes from what I read. And so like this time it was one provider. But if AWS ever it's not that it's not that Bezos wakes up and says, hey, I don't like crypto, it's going to happen. But if a government wants to say, just put on a sanction and overnight it disappears. Before we start rolling, you talked about Tornado Cash, for example, and how people are kind of like, giving back inches and people are complying, like there's a level of over-compliance.
Yeah, there's compliance and over-compliance, right? Compliance is important. I'm worried about over-compliance. I think governments are, at least they're being very reasonable, and for the most part, they're of course, crazy examples, but for the most part, I think they're very reasonable in terms of like banning technologies. But companies that overcomply, like GitHub, right? So I know the guys at Story Of Akash, the developers, even the government came out and said clearly that writing code is not illegal, writing privacy software is not illegal, hosting privacy software code is not illegal, interacting and operating is illegal, right? So they were very clear on the parameters of the ban. Even after that clarification, GitHub still banned, the Tornado developers' accounts, and they banned, they took down the source code. And the worst part, they're still charging the monthly fees.
Wow, really?
That's how bad the Web2 infrastructure is, right? So that's why it's very important to have decentralization, full stack decentralization. Full stack decentralization. I'm talking about entire supply chain decentralization, right? And the reason why, Akash is prominent in Cosmos is because, well, we are very aligned with the values of the Cosmos ecosystem in terms of scalability, in terms of usability, in terms of, the app chain model and whatnot. But now Akash is the only on-chain deployment platform, right? So now we're with interchain accounts. A smart contract on Juno can own a deployment on Akash without a human in the middle. So if you remove the human out of the equation, you suddenly have a new world of compliance and new world on how you look at compliance, right? Like, so a smart contract can deploy directly on Akash. And
But
the
does
smart
the-
contract could be a DAO. Yeah.
But does the provider have any say about what is run on their GPU, for example?
They do.
They do.
So the
So,
idea,
but the compliance gets pushed over to the compute provider, no?
they can.
Okay.
I mean, but computer providers are all over the world.
So somebody's willing to do it, probably.
So as long as there's one provider that's willing to host your workload, it's going to run.
Right.
Right. So for things that are like crazy, like child pornography and stuff like that, people don't want to run that stuff on the server. So you have the censorship problem self-correct itself. But if you have something about jurisdictional law, that's about jurisdiction, whatever they need to comply, right?
Like
so,
if there's something that's say anti-CCP, and it's somebody in China might not run it, but if somebody's in the US, I don't
absolutely,
mind.
China can ban it, but US can run it, right?
Yeah.
Things like that. So you got to comply to whatever jurisdiction you have to comply to. But it's a global, connectivity. It's a borderless system. So it functions at protocol level. There is no censorship, and we can't have censorship. That just doesn't work for Akash, right?
Right.
So yes, but at the same time, like the providers need to comply to whatever the region. So there's DRMC compliance. There's a whole lot of compliance. It's just not about like,
And who are the fork providers? Like, how are you, and I know you read your most recent update where you said there's like a 4-part acquisition plan. Are you aiming more for the masses when it comes to providers, like, I run a GPU, or is it like you're going for big firms, like, for example, like you said, Amazon might run servers, maybe even Amazon's going to start running some servers, maybe, and so forth.
So we're getting a mixed bag. So we initially began with our launch partner, Equinix, which is the largest provider in the world, largest data center provider in the world. They saw the vision with us, so they gave us quite a lot of they're very, very kind to like bootstrap the network in the early days. But as and now we have about 50 providers. I think top of my head I can remember 50. We know we one of them we run, Overclock Labs team. One of the providers we run because we want a marquee provider that we can test and whatnot. But 49 others, we have no idea who they are. There's like audited system that identifies them separately. Through that we can kind of know, but there are a lot of providers now. This is pre-incentives, right? So now we're going to start adding incentives, so we can expect like much larger, much diverse set of providers, and we're going to incentivize the behavior where the
incentives
providers
via AKT, I assume.
AKT incentives, where we want heavily distribution. So we're targeting about 1,000 providers in the next 12 months or so.
Wow. Okay.
So we want really heavily distributed.
So like a 20x.
Original vision of the edge computing. I think we're going to see that, right? So by 2024, I think Akash will be the most distributed network. So if you have like 1,000 regions, you can imagine the kind of decentralization that we can achieve when we start doing node hosting and a whole lot of things, right?
So that brings me to kind of the next question, and I'm saying this as a proud investor, so I'm going to push back here a little bit. There's a website, the Web3 Index, and I think all of the decentralized web infrastructure suffers from the same problem, where you've got Helium crazy coverage, but as of in the last 30 days, Helium made $1,073.
Yeah.
Akash in the last 30 days made $2,832.
Yeah.
We've made only $42,000.
Yeah.
Like almost every single decentralized web infrastructure company is making kind of like pennies compared to their market caps.
Yeah.
And so let's say we have 1,000 providers, what is going to, two things, I guess. One, cause more usage, but then beyond that, how do the economics work? Because on one hand, currently you said Akash is cheaper than, let's say, AWS.
Yeah.
The provider needs to make money, and if we're giving out AKT incentives somewhere, the AKT token probably also needs to accrue some form of value,
right?
For it to maintain its value.
Yeah.
How do you view that all resolving, let's say, in the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years?
Yeah. So Akash is making $2,000. That's $2,000 not on the centralized cloud. So,
Okay.
The fact that it's making $2,000 per month is like a moment of pride for me, because this is pure value that's being exchanged without any additional incentives. Like these providers are not getting anything beyond just what they're earning for providing services, right? They're clearly not very profitable. So the providers that we have in Akash are using their excess compute. They're like, we can get whatever we can get,
right?
Take it, right? And the reason why we want to add incentives is to keep the lights on, right? Because the demand is way harder than supply, and we know that. In Helium's case, Akash is in every decentralized web service case, right? And the reason for demand way harder is just two factors, right? The first is acquisition, second is retention.
Yeah.
Akash retention numbers, I bet this is the same thing with most decentralized applications, is very, very low. We're talking about like sub 50%, right, for the most part, right?
And why is that?
Because there's just a lack of traditional engagement infrastructure. Like an email, for example. Like if you're running out of funds, if you have a deployment on Akash and you're running out of funds, and there is no way to contact you to tell you that you're running out of funds.
Oh, so they need to manually restock, not just that, and push, right? Because it's push only, it's not subscription based.
It's not subscription based. It's not. You can't just run a credit card.
So the accounting team needs to, acquire more IKT, which currently still we probably need to buy it straight on Osmosis or somewhere like on Cosmos, which means maybe buying some Atom on Coinbase, sending that Atom to Osmosis.
It's high friction.
Very
high friction, right? So in fact, I mean, the network effects in crypto in the Web3 is just next level. When Hetzner banned crypto, Akash was trending on Twitter with 7,000 tweets per hour.
Wow.
So you can clearly send the first thing on people's mind was Akash. When you see a product that popular, you see the revenues that are $2,000. Something is not working out here, right? Because we have such a huge churn when it comes to the pipeline, right? So churn all the way from getting AKT tokens, churn all the way from renewing, churn all the way from just getting infrastructure things go wrong, right? Getting an email that, hey, your disks are full, go update your disk, things like that. And I see these like alerts coming, but there's no way to alert the user, right? So there's a lot of engagement infrastructure that's missing. There's a lot of on and off ramp infrastructure that we need to build. Like ideally we want to have a credit card and good to go. But the good news is the beautiful thing about Akash, what we've done is this entire ecosystem of protocol clients. So currently there are about 5 protocol clients that are that are public, and we have 3 more that are still in private and we'll be announcing very soon. Protocol clients are essentially different applications built on top of Akash that enable using Akash much simpler, right? All either from a provider standpoint or from a user standpoint, right? So there are applications like Evergreen, where you put in your credit card and they will, do a chia mining like workload for you based on your credit card, right? I mean, these are obviously centralized entity, right? I mean, the hosted solutions, and there are applications like Wixlow who's doing like fiat on ramp based on invoices. So they bill you later, right?
Got it.
And there are platforms like CloudMoss and Speron, and they're just doing like deployments directly from your GitHub, right? So you don't have to package a container. You don't need to touch a container. You can just git push and deploy on Akash, right? And then you have Praetor, which makes becoming a provider super simple. Now they're adding like auditing, and also there's this whole army of like different applications being built on top of Akash that are contributing to the adoption, right? And another big reason when it comes to adoption, a big challenge we have that is just the lack of user interfaces, right? Like we haven't built a user interface, and that's, in hindsight, I think that's one of the best things we did. Why? Because I have a thesis of like building. If you need to build 100 features, build 99. Don't build 100 features. Build just enough so that smart people, when they use Akash, will see opportunities to build more.
Okay.
So if you're building a Lego house, do not complete the house, and give enough foundation so other people can
build something
on top of that. That's how you make friends. That's how people like look at an opportunity,
And-
look at a problem to solve.
And Akash becomes more of a network than just a decentralized company, so to say. It's not just one entity,
Network.
but now there's all these other.
We have about 5 publicly announced companies that are building on top of Akash and contributing back to Akash, right? And that number is going to be about 60 that we're targeting over the next 12 months. So over the next 12 months, we want to have at least 60 protocol clients, about 1,000 providers, right? All these protocol clients contributing to supply and contributing to adoption in whatever.
And so is this then like a layer 1 style where they all launch their own tokens, or do they get grants in from Akash and it just stays a one token ecosystem?
We don't know. So we want it to be pure. We don't want. We haven't given grants for most of these. Like, Akash is not. Well, there's like some proposals that they got funded directly from the community fund. So it's a very decentralized system in that sense. Like, there's no company that's like pumping, like giving money, right? I would think about grants. Like, I've seen the grants coming from like bigger ecosystems, and I've noticed the churn. The retention for the granted projects is about 36%. In some of the big ones, I don't want to name who it is, right?
Sure.
And there's a lot of churn when people get grants and they just go to another project and just run away, right? So
yeah, because you
lose that
you
purity.
attract people for the wrong reasons. I mean, I've seen it even with portfolio companies sometimes where let's say they get 5 offers for grants. And if there's one that offers a lot of money with no strings attached, say, let's take that money and maybe, 12 months from now, 6 months from now, we'll build somewhere else.
Yeah. So bull market attracted a lot of these like grant hoppers,
Yes.
right? Like, grant ninjas, and that created misincentives, and that led to just unintended behavior.
Right.
That we want to avoid. So
And
Akash
honestly,
is
a lot
more
huge
pure
waste
play.
of both talent, resources, and time, because
Yeah.
those people then spend wasted time building on an ecosystem that they no intention on staying on, and then to rebuild sometimes in different languages. Let's say they built in Rust or somewhere, and then they had to rebuild in Solidity or vice versa.
Yeah. I want people coming and using Akash because they see value in it.
Yeah.
Right. And that is very, very important in the early ecosystem. We can add grants and incentives at the growth stage, not product market fit stage, right?
Yep.
So, and during product market fit stage, you're going to see revenues which are very small. So, so instead of focusing on like getting more revenues, we want to focus on getting better use cases and nailing the use case, right? So, I think you're going to start seeing quite a lot of adoption now with, Sperons and the even Fleek. I think like Third Web and all these companies also announced that they're going to like integrate Akash deeply. So you're going to see quite a lot of adoption coming from these distribution channels, right? And we also announced a new console that we are building. We did a demo yesterday. So the goal of the new console it's a fully non-custodial console.
Yeah.
Decentralized, non-custodial, signed using a Kepler. Now we can have measurable, attributable deployments using this, right? So we can clearly show you what the retention is. If you do on-chain retention, it's not useful because there's so many, very, very hard to attribute what a active wallet is and what's not.
Yeah.
Right? The classic definition of active wallet is something someone that deployed in the last 1 month or something is not true anymore, right? Because we're seeing a lot of like usage patterns where I would just use one wallet per deployment so I can like transfer. I mean, anyway, the point being, building an attributable funnel and attributable, data is what console is providing. So, and this is something we can automate. We can do paid, different acquisition channels, paid and organic. Of course, we prefer organic over paid. So now you'll start seeing a lot more diligent growth, coming to play. And with incentives, I believe that if you have 1,000 regions, I mean, you go to a Web2, application and look at Akash, I think that's a very attractive value proposition, right? So
I'm curious because like besides the crypto fund, we also run a metaverse fund, and one of the biggest conversations in the metaverse is cloud rendering, cloud streaming, cloud computing, from the perspective that you have these massive online worlds. Ideally, right now, when you look at most online worlds, let's say Sandbox, Decentraland, they're super low fidelity,
right?
But there are newcomers coming up that want to build, let's say, an Unreal 5, high quality, and want to have servers with, right now, most of them are capped, let's say, shards of 50, but they want to go bigger. And so is this something that Akash could serve in the future?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's even better for low latency gaming. right? Because with this, say with a network of 1,000 regions,
Yeah.
the goal is to reduce latency to 20 milliseconds, network latency to 20 milliseconds for 95th percentile of active internet population. So with 1,000 servers, we can get to a very close low latency number.
What's latency usually?
Depends on from where. Like
Gotcha.
server from US coast to coast about 300 milliseconds.
Oh wow, so from 300 to 20.
It's coast to coast. US
Yeah,
latency
yeah.
is 300 milliseconds.
Yeah.
It's actually lower latency over these or
Yeah.
undersea cables. Because
But you said you want to bring it to 20 milliseconds.
you can have coast to coast, but like so, in a sense, like if you have a server in Virginia and if you're accessing the server from California, you incur 300 milliseconds. So instead of accessing the server from instead of having the server in Virginia, you should
Yeah.
have a server in California.
Got it. So you're
But
gonna
that
tap
application
into
should automatically like scale
Yeah.
based on where your users are.
right.
You as the app developer shouldn't write that scalability logic.
Correct.
So that's how you sort of like.
So
scale.
somebody could build that on Akash that they, utilizing the marketplace that you would automatically tap into a provider that is in your region.
Right. So the application, the scheduling logic automatically becomes like, hey, just deploy where you see my most of my users are. Right. Like so you can customize your configuration that way. So that's great for communications applications. That's great for any application that requires real-time peer-to-peer communication.
Yeah.
Right. So you can use a server as your backup relay.
Yeah.
Right. So and you can do a lot. The kind of applications you can do with like 1,000 regions is beyond like what we can sit and imagine. I think it's going to unlock a whole range of metaverse applications that we haven't yet seen. So there's a lot of latency in metaverse, and we can solve the latency using this high performance grid.
The latency and even just the hardware requirements, because part of the reason why we added to our investment with you guys in that time frame was because this was like 3 months in now with the metaverse fund, where like this was just something that kept recurring. For example, with virtual reality, most Oculus headsets, they only have so much power on them. So most of the real gaming happens when you plug it into a computer. So now you need Steam VR. You have got, let's say, $4,000 gaming computer.
Right.
You have the headset, but it just kills the experience and totally reduces the TAM. And so almost all these developers are looking to work with cloud streaming providers that would enable them to have super high fidelity gaming that would usually be run on a computer but run in the cloud. And just
Cloud gaming is a big use case for, especially when we have GPUs.
Yes, right. Does need to come first, but you soon. 3 months, you said.
Yeah, 3 months. So we have the design ready, the implementation started. I think we may open source the spec very soon, so people can see and start experimenting with GPUs a lot sooner than it's going to come out, right? And we're going to be a lot more like communicative about GPUs, and the spec is like the progress about the GPUs.
Has the merge already? Is that something that you're actively in talks with? Like, let's say, for example, big mining firms, because I know like a lot of GPU mining went over to ETC temporarily.
So we'll be making a few announcements very soon, as we are in integration phases with like a lot of these big miners. So and they are, of course, big miners are hit because of GPUs, right? And they have enormous amount of GPUs, but a lot of them actually even have enormous amount of CPUs too. Especially the miners, right? The public miners, right? Our close rate with a lot of the miners has been like 96%.
Wow.
So it's the problem is very real.
Yeah.
There are miners and there's mining operating systems like Rave OS and stuff like that.
Is the difference that they're operating in like leased hardware or?
So a lot of the miners, at least the retail miners, use a mining operating system. They don't write the OS. They don't like do the configuration work as But so the OS will provide all the bells and whistles. Some of the OSs will automatically like adjust based on your capacity and whatnot. So integrating into this OSS, say Akash is like directly integrated into the OS, where you have GPU, you can start like deploying on becoming an Akash provider, right? That will give us a lot more exponential effect than going to individual miners, like because these operating systems become distribution channels essentially, right?
Right.
So it's like going to Walmart instead of going to individual people that are
of course,
right? Like
you become like the aggregator of all cloud compute.
Right.
Eventually.
So there's efforts. So from like direct like engagement effort, we engage with bigger cloud providers, bigger like data centers, like miners, and then we engage with a lot of the like distribution channels that'll get us to the mass spread. There's also master nodes. There's a whole lot of things that we're working on to like actually integrate with.
And what do I tried to touch on earlier? What do the economics look like if if me as a consumer, if I spend, let's say, $1 on cloud compute, what percentage goes to the provider? What percentage goes to the AKT token, or is maybe to the foundation to keep operations running? Like, is there a certain economic split?
No, it's direct peer-to-peer now. There's no like value capture that's built into the protocol yet.
Yeah.
We are exploring different value capture mechanisms. One of the models that we're exploring is a take income. I mean, again, like take income is basically taking a cut of whatever value that's being exchanged and either burning it or either giving it back. There's some value accrual mechanism, right? Like to the stakers, because ultimately, right now the security budget comes from inflationary tokens.
Correct.
It's a fixed supply, so the inflation is on a decay curve.
Yeah.
Right? So that's going to run out in a few years, right? Like, so
there needs to be a reason to hold after that.
Yeah. So people need, or else it's just chain loses security.
Correct.
Right. So it's important for the chain to have security. That's why a take income is important for security of the chain. Without security of the chain, you don't have the chain.
Correct.
Right. So it's important, and the battle right now we're fighting is the regulatory lens.
Of course.
So the take income with Ethereum take income model, SEC is considering that as security. Right. So it's very, very important what the outcome of the Ethereum case is going to be. For us to comfortably make a case that this is not a security. This is, this is not a classical a investment instrument. It is for security of the network.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, has there been a case with the buy and burn model? Maybe Maker could be something similar where they do charge an interest rate and they do use that for buying. And
SEC thinks that's a security.
Okay.
Like SEC thinks everything is secure. The moment you take some money out of the moment you take a cut, it's one of those things that
we need more clarity.
Yeah, I think it's going to come very soon. I think by the time you're going to get meaningful revenue on Akash is going to be clear, right?
Yeah.
We're not in a rush, right, to capture value. There's still like inflationary tokens that's going to last for a while before this becomes a critical issue.
Correct, yeah.
But you have to capture value somehow to pay for budget,
correct,
to pay for security, and if the value of AKT directly correlates to the security of the blockchain. So the AKT needs to have higher value in order for the blockchain to be secure. Without security, there's no functionality.
Correct.
Right? It's a decentralized system. So in that vein, I think it's important for AKT, price to hold, and also AKT needs to be liquid in order for this marketplace to function.
Correct.
Right. The more providers there are, more pressure there's going to be. So you need more liquidity. That means the price needs to support that. So the price of AKT is a direct function of the security and the functioning of the system. Not as an investment asset, but actually.
Right, of course, because it's the backbone of it essentially, and that kind of leads to the next question I had with regarding to Cosmos, and that I think we'll probably spend like the next 20 minutes talking about Cosmos, because I'm always one of the hottest discussions in crypto is always the different layer 1 wars, and I know technically the Cosmos is a layer 0, and you can always ask the founders of those layer 1s, and they'll tell you theirs is the best. But I much prefer builders saying why did you choose to build on Cosmos? Like, what was it that made you want to build Akash on Cosmos versus making it in an EVM dApp, for example?
Yeah. Well, we tried an EVM and it didn't work. I mean,
just
that would be just like...
Because you'd save the whole security issue that you just mentioned, because you wouldn't need your own nodes.
Correct. So it's a big cost to deploy on Cosmos, right? Because you need a security budget.
Yep.
So your token economics need to account for that security budget.
Yep.
Right. So you need to have a native token. Initially, when we started Akash, we didn't even have a token. We were like, hey, we'll use Ethereum for payment. Right. We don't need a token technically, as
back
long
then,
as
Overclock Labs, right?
Overclock Labs, even the first version of Akash, like the first design of Akash, we didn't have an AKT token part of the thing.
Interesting.
We wanted a settlement token, and we were like, we would use originally we thought Bitcoin, but then we realized Bitcoin was not useful.
Yeah.
It's not usable for settlement. And then we went Ethereum as settlement.
Yeah.
It was the ERC20 project. This is in 2017. Right.
And so why didn't that work? Because I think this is a point Bitcoiners love to make, to say like, oh, we don't need a token. You can just run on Bitcoin, or in this case, you could just run on Ethereum.
Right.
Why wasn't it capable?
CryptoKitties launched and it crashed Akash Network.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And we were like, you're not going to build a mission critical infrastructure platform where you have essentially a 40,000 user influx is going to crash the system.
And you're dependent on unfortunate this week, Bored Apes launched Other Side and everything paused.
We don't want that. Akash is a crypto
Question
system.
mark, yeah.
So that's when the importance of having our own blockchain came into play,
Yeah.
right? And there was no other blockchain really practical enough, and then it became evident that in order to build mission critical systems, you need sovereignty. Sovereignty in your block space design, sovereignty in your scalability design, your economic design, pretty much everything. The entire blockchain needs to be sovereign and it needs to serve the needs of a single application, right? That's why sovereignty. That's why you have currencies for individual countries, because currencies solve or
That's right,
serve
yeah.
individual countries, right? That's why a global currency is a bad idea sometimes.
Because there's individual ecosystems and they might make bad decisions that make them fail.
Correct.
And that shouldn't tear the whole thing down.
Right, exactly. So it's important. We realize that it's important for Akash to have its own blockchain, and Cosmos is the only framework that allows us to build a sovereign chain. So we started adopting Cosmos in 2018. It was
Alrighty,
called
wow,
Tendermint.
that's early. Yes.
So we were one of the first blockchains to use Cosmos besides the Cosmos Hub. And I think Cosmos Hub launched in 2019 or late 2018. I can't remember. I think it's 2018 they launched. That was the first chain that was launched using Tendermint, and we were on Tendermint heavily. So we had to end up writing all the modules ourselves on top of Tendermint. And Cosmos SDK is basically a bunch of modules on top of Tendermint that became standard and tested, and they had bigger team than us. And then we launched our first testnet using Tendermint. It was unstable because we went off upstream at some point because the upstream was going Cosmos SDK route. And then we switched to Cosmos SDK in 2020.
2020, yeah.
We threw away all our code. We have about 200,000 lines of code we threw away.
Wow.
Because that nothing makes me more happy than deleting code. Writing code is awesome, but deleting code is even more.
Why? Because you got to start fresh and make it more efficient.
Less maintenance, less attack vectors. The
Okay.
more code, more attack vectors.
Of course.
Like the attack surface, right? Less code, less attack surface.
Oh, throwing away code, not as in like you were able to. You had to start over. So like it was net less lines.
No, we not start over, refactor.
Yeah,
to a
refactor,
point
yeah.
Where we could remove the accounts module. and
Gotcha.
use the Cosmos SDK accounts module.
Gotcha.
Remove our
Less-
staking module. Use the Cosmos SDK.
Less
staking
complexity
module.
too.
Remove a lot of the governance, for example, proposals, and the whole modules that we wrote ourselves. We can get rid of it
Yeah.
and use Cosmos SDK, right? So we can use the code which is used by a lot of other projects. So you have a lot more eyes looking
Yeah.
at it. It's well audited. It's well tested. It's battle tested. So it's always better to use a library versus writing your own code, because the more eyes you have, the better it is for security, right?
It's interesting at the time, 2018, 2019, I feel like there was a time period when actually I feel like Polkadot still had more mindshare than Cosmos, and then Cosmos just kind of like totally whooped its ass. Now like Cosmos is like, they're just not comparable. I think I checked recently, Cosmos and Osmo have like 100,000 active wallets. Polkadot has like 1,000.
Right.
What did you ever look at Polkadot? And
We looked at Substrate. I mean, it was very, it was decent, but it was not very appealing for a infrastructure developer like us. And Golang was a lot more powerful language from programmability, and plus we're all written in Go, so we're not switching to a Substrate unless we see great value in it.
Yeah.
We see value in Cosmos now because it allows us to like move fast and update things faster, but Golang was too strong, and we looked at Cosmos SDK. So for us, like I feel like throughout our careers, we made really good bets really early in a lot of good tech. We made a good bet on Docker in 2012. It worked out really well. We made a good bet on Kubernetes in 2014. I mean, Kubernetes is used by 80% of the cloud today. So, and we made a good bet on Cosmos in 2017, 2018 timeframe, and that evolved to an ecosystem that you see today, right?
Yeah.
So for reasons unknown, we tend to make really good bets when it comes to tech, like choosing the good tech, right? It was not political. It was not about ecosystem momentum. It's just about really good tech.
Yeah.
And for me, the way I determine is a lot of factors, right? A lot of signals I look at. Look at a Git repo of the project. I look at the comments. Look at how the issues. Look at the insight. Get the pace at which these issues are being solved.
Yeah.
The communication between the code dev and the issuer, right? There's a lot that tells you about a project just by looking at the GitHub repo, right?
Yeah.
So and Cosmos felt very Kubernetes like the way they interact, the way
What is that?
Kubernetes.
Okay.
Like Kubernetes is it's the number one ecosystem in cloud.
Okay.
Right. When you look at Kubernetes, I could draw a lot of parallels from Cosmos to Kubernetes. Like simple things I would propose, like I don't know, recently I proposed that hey, we should like have proper types for errors, so it's easy for developing clients, yada yada yada. And the idea was taken immediately, and they started like planning around it. So there's a lot of enthusiasm by developers, and it's very distributed. There's no one company building Cosmos. It's like several companies. Osmosis now I think is going to start maintaining the upstream fork for Cosmos SDK. It's not informal or it's not the company started by the founders of Cosmos, right?
Right.
And that's beauty, and that really tells you it's not a single person or single entity that's controlling. There's a lot of people contributing to Cosmos and making it successful.
I've also found it, and I said this earlier today with Tor, who's also building in Cosmos, where I said, I think to me the Cosmos ecosystem is one of the most authentic ecosystems where there's real developers building real products and solutions, whether it's an Akash, whether it's a DVPN, whether it's a secret network. Those are unique products, and also, Cosmos is maybe one of the only layer 1s, layer 0s that didn't do like ecosystem grants and like incentives and liquidity, this and that, but rather it's just like people use Akash if they want to use Akash, and that's, I think, more sustainable, more long term, because as we all learned, it's not our first bear market, that we will always have another one. And those, to me, these incentives are always like almost like short-term debt in the sense that like you're giving away essentially like free tokens. Somebody will then need the reason why they hold them. If not, they're going to sell them, which means you're going to pay the price tomorrow. Now, one thing I was curious about because Cosmos 2.0 is coming out, and I believe there will now be the ability that you could run nodes directly via Cosmos versus having independent
Interchain security.
Right,
Really
with interchain security.
Yeah.
Is that something you're considering? Because that could also, like, I guess, reduce your cost or overhead.
It's always a cost.
Yeah.
You got to pay. Is always a cost for security, right? It's not free. It's either gas fees.
Yeah.
Somebody's paying the cost.
Of course.
The question is like, who's paying the cost, right? Like, I don't think it's going to make a difference for us because interchain security is really good for bootstrapping a network. But my thesis is once you bootstrap, you will need sovereignty. It's impossible, right? Like DYDX and Cave chose a sovereign model by moving to Cosmos because they're running their order books on the validators to get privacy, right? And also get the performance they need, right? Latency. So you can do off-chain computation for scalability. You can do so many things when you have sovereignty that you can't do on a chain because a FAT protocol is going to need to serve all protocols that it hosts. It can't serve just one individual protocol. Thereby, it can't make the trade-offs for an individual protocol. So sovereignty allows you to make the trade-offs that's optimal for your scenario and your use case, right? At the base layer, right? So I think just like how internet today, like, okay, you can start off, like, say a WordPress website to simple. You can start off on WordPress.com, which gives you like, I don't know, all the bells and whistles they host for like $10 a month. The moment you start scaling up like a TechCrunch, you need to run your own servers.
Right. For more functionality.
More functionality. There will come a point where you cannot use shared infrastructure anymore, right? Dropbox is a classic example. Dropbox started off as on the cloud, but they came to a point where it's very, very expensive on the cloud. So they run their own data centers. Walmart, right? People are going to need their own compute or own sovereignty, like be it compute, be it software, be it whatever layer you're running on, eventually for scaling. And there's really no other way to get the kind of trade-offs that you need to get. Well, the trade-offs is like, well, every time you have sovereignty, you need security, right? So
I'm curious about your opinion about this then. So for Akash specifically, because it is mission critical, you need your own chain.
Yeah.
Who needs their own chain and who doesn't need their own chain? Like,
if you're launching an NFT, you don't need your own chain, right?
But let's say, for example, would you think that every DeFi protocol should have should an Aave have their own chain, or should there just be like one DeFi chain that like aggregates multiple players like an Aave, Uniswap, and so forth?
Right.
To not lose the composability.
Depends. I mean, it's not all DeFi is equal, right? Like if you're an exchange and if you want low latency, high performance trading, get DYDX. You want limit orders or you want things like that. You need your own chain, right? If you don't need low latency trading or high performance trading, you probably don't need. But then, so you have your own chain. Let's talk about trade-offs, right? Having your own chain means you're going to lose composability, right? So that might affect your liquidity, right?
Yeah.
I mean, composability is getting better and better.
I was going
going
to say, like, there's going to be more and more IBC composability
right.
too.
It's
Yeah.
getting better. It's I mean, currently it's a trade-off, right?
Correct. Yeah.
It's not as the composability is never going to be that great, as great as Ethereum. Uh, Ethereum, like the best analogy I can give from a traditional software development is like developing on Ethereum is like developing on a gigantic SQL database where you have control over your own tables, you write control over your own tables, and read capability across all tables.
Yes.
So you can construct like a store procedure that'll talk to every table you want, just like in operating on a single database. You can get very, very creative with SQL. You can get
Yeah.
the composability that you like only dream. Yeah, it's going to be slow. Yeah, it's going to be like, not great performance, but you can get to do things that you can't do
Yeah.
over a sharded system, for example. Sharded system in the sense, it's a system where you have multiple servers, multiple SQLs, and you need, in order to retrieve from SQL, you need to connect to the SQL.
Yeah.
So there's like network latency, there's like, and you're not going to get the same level of abstraction that you can get on a single database.
Yeah.
So that's the difference between IBC and
Ethereum.
EVM composability. So IBC is always going to be, at least, I mean, other people may or may not agree with me, but I think inherently, just historically looking at how distributed systems are designed, like a BigQuery, right? BigQuery is limited in terms of composability, the kind of queries you can do. But BigQuery is great for having 10 terabyte or 20 terabyte database. Whereas if you put a 20 terabyte database in a Postgres, you're gonna fail, right? But BigQuery, is a distributed system, so you're going to work like a distributed system. You're going to have to make the trade-offs like a distributed system, and you're going to have like fault tolerance that you need to work on, like when you're working on a distributed system, right? So again, it's a trade-off, right? Like, so if you need the hyper composability, EVMs or a shared state or fat protocol chains are great. Like EVM or Solana, I'm categorizing them to single sort of a category. But if you want hyper scalability, you need an app chain, right? Because you can get the control that you want. With control, you can do a lot more things that you can't do on a fat chain.
Which makes sense why all the like very, very unique chains that like have very specific purposes, like almost like very, very purpose-driven chains, app chains, are on Cosmos. Because they need for example, adding privacy on top of Ethereum, it's tricky, and then you need a native privacy ergo secret network. Compute is going to be, you cannot have slowdowns because somebody's launching a land sale. So you need your own.
And composability is getting better and better. Like with interchain accounts now, a Juno smart contract can own a deployment on Akash. So now you can have a DAO own its own website, voted by the members of the DAO, using their Juno accounts. And you remove human out of the equation, and that Juno account, essentially controls, deployment and who you're going to take down now.
Right.
Take down Juno, right? So it makes immutable deployments possible.
Right.
So now with that was interchain accounts. Now you have interchain security. That's going to take composability to the next level. Right? So I think Atom, I'm very, very bullish on Atom 2.0. With interchain security, I think that's going to just increase the amount of projects launched, because, well, it's very difficult to launch in Cosmos because you need to bootstrap security. That means you got to go recruit validators, and there are only 500 at the max validators right now in Cosmos, right? So it's a small number, right? So that makes it maybe easier to find them because from the mint scan you can get it.
And if your market cap is low, that also means then that your attackability is very cheap, and so it's much, much harder to attack a Cosmos at, let's call today, 4 billion, 5 billion market cap versus, a small cap project, let's say like a DVPN that's worth, let's say 10 million, where if somebody really wanted to, do damage, all they need is like $5 million and that's all it takes.
And then it comes down to your protocol design, how much capable, like, we were like very clear that Akash is only used for coordination. The protocol, the blockchain, is not used for execution. Right. So then you basically design your systems in a way to be hyper fault tolerant. Right. Fault tolerance is like, it's not about avoiding faults. I mean, there's nothing you can do with this attacker with $1 billion one attacker. Right. Sure. You can hang on to your tokens. You can force the chain. You can
but they can't touch the actual compute.
They can't touch the actual compute.
Yeah.
That's very important to wall them up, right? Just like a submarine, how you would design your submarine in a way that if one chamber is compromised to water, the other chambers are still not compromised. So you design your protocol to be very, very fault tolerant. And yeah, so it's not easy right off the bat to design on Cosmos. I think. I mean, it's easy to launch a chain, but designing the distributed system is a lot more complicated.
Awesome.
And I think that's going to get easier and easier with exchange accounts. Yeah.
What do the next 3 years for Akash look like? So we're going to have 1,000 providers.
Yeah.
Right now we got 11 terabytes of active leases.
Yeah.
So where are we taking that one to?
Really, in 3 years, I would like to see a Microsoft or a Google or Amazon Akash.
Okay.
I think it's going to happen.
And so then we're going to talk petabyte, not terabyte.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's going to happen. It's starting to happen, actually. It's starting to see a lot of like enterprise interest in Akash. And within 3 years, we're going to double down on what's really working. So the DoD use case happened because not because somebody from Overclock Labs team, the sales team, went and talked to a DoD general.
Yeah.
It's grassroots, bottoms up.
It's like
right?
a hackathon, right?
It's inside inside DoD. There was a hackathon. There was a bunch of Marines and airmen and guardsmen that love Akash, and they love the fact that Akash gives sovereignty. And military now, so military has their own servers. They don't use the cloud. They can't use the cloud, right? So for them to have cloud-like capability, they have to pay someone like Amazon $15 billion to implement the system, versus using something like Akash gives them free.
Right.
So they love the sovereignty part of Akash, right? And so that is grassroots, right? So we are seeing similar patterns in big companies. People finding about Akash, they come to Akash through a hackathon or a hack event or a Gitcoin grant or whatever. Deploy something like Akash. I go randomly on Twitter and do hey, 200 AKT if you deploy like a metric server, right? Like,
oh, that's cool.
Believe me, we had recruited so many people that way. So this grassroots organic recruitment mechanisms work, and we're going to double down, triple down on these methods that are working. I think we're going to see quite a lot of enterprise penetration in the next 3 years, right? So, but I think like having a Google or an Amazon or a Microsoft on Akash as a provider. Just changes the game altogether. I mean, that legitimizes.
I was going to say, for purely like the legitimization, of course, the added bandwidth and everything else.
But that adds credibility. Now we are military grade. Now we can go come. If it's good enough for the military, it's probably good enough for your NFT project, right?
That's right. Yeah.
But that would be
not going
really
away.
military grade, enterprise grade technology, right? And that's going to happen. We just need to hunker down, keep building, survive, and thrive over the next few years. And I love bear markets because I call it the build markets, right?
Build markets, yeah.
Because this is where there's no nonsense. Look around, this conference around,
a lot quieter.
It's a lot quieter. You don't have people, the NFT people, most of them left.
They all lost their money.
Yeah.
The after parties now, it's normal, just mixers versus 3 world famous DJs performing after each other.
The other day I went to a crypto dinner. There was not even alcohol served.
Oh wow!
I mean,
drink tickets. The last 2 parties I went to, drink tickets again. Versus just endless open bar.
Exactly. So it feels more pure. It feels like a bill market. Feels like there's no nonsense. I would see my friends Anatoly without security details. You could actually go talk to these people. It's kind of cool. Yeah.
That's awesome. Do you have a favorite book that you would recommend people?
I am actually reading this book called Crypto by Stephen Levy.
Okay.
It's written.
Oh, that's the guy from Freakonomics now. Stephen Levy.
I think that's the same guy.
Yeah. Okay. But go ahead.
It could be a different guy, but this guy wrote Hackers, the book which became a movie.
Okay.
And this book is about the crypto wars of the 80s. It's a fascinating book. It's about, this is not the first time government went to war with crypto. It happened before. And the government didn't want encryption in people's hands, right? Because they have their own reasons. This is a story about how people won, and how government lost, essentially, right? So it's a very highly recommend reading this book. It'll take a lot of analogies, and you'll see a lot of parallels to what's happening right now, and how people will eventually win, right?
Hopefully,
I highly recommend it. I'm enjoying it a lot.
In the 80s, interesting. Where can people find more about you? Best way to connect.
Well, Akash Network is the website. And Twitter is the most active channel for me and Akash Network as well. So AkashNet_ is the Akash Network. My Twitter handle is Greg Osuri, GregOsuri.
Amazing. Always good to see you, Greg.
Absolutely.
And keep building. It's a build market.
Yes.
Have a good one.
Build market.